Today, we're going to talk about HealthTech innovations in 2023, and in particular, how these could potentially help the NHS. What's the HealthTech innovation space looking like in 2023, and where do you think it's going? What's your thoughts?
So I think when I look at the space currently, I see kind of three major strands that I find particularly interesting, and I'm keen to see how they develop. Obviously, I mean, it's kind of expected. So I will go with the first expected one to say out there. It's the remote patient monitoring space and the virtual care space that I've found has gained a lot of traction this year. And, we read a lot of headlines about it as well. It's gone quite mainstream. And I think it's really important work to be done to really help relieve the pressure on the NHS. So I think that there's some really interesting development, and I'm keen to see how those innovations become embedded in new pathways, really. So interesting companies we've seen also support kind of more specific conditions, such as OncoHealth, supporting cancer patients throughout their journey. And I think there's really a positive trend there. But I think the way we're looking at it as Ally is really, how can this be embedded and really kind of designed to become a new pathway, a new hybrid pathway that kind of takes into consideration the requirements still for hands-on care. Not everything can be virtual and remote. And I think for these innovations to succeed, we really need to invest in the community support to care for patients and deliver these kind of hands-on interventions. The second area to call out is really surrounding diagnosis. And I think there are really some interesting advances that we've seen, which kind of leverage science and tech. Probably a good example that comes to mind here is Healthy.io maybe, and Hera Health, where they're really leveraging the power of sensors and smartphone lenses to help remotely assess conditions and diagnose. So in the case of Healthy.io, it's really, I'm really interested in what they're doing with wound mapping and wound care. It's such a huge kind of area for the NHS as well. And I think from a scientific perspective for diagnosis, there's a lot of development. And I think COVID has also pushed that towards lateral flows in their usage. So I think they can be really leveraged to make diagnosis more accessible. And I'm interested in what PocDoc is doing, for example, with their lipid tests. We know that, cardiovascular disease is such a huge area for the NHS as well. So anything that can help diagnose earlier and better is really welcome. I'll probably end with the third kind of segment of innovation, which I see really as kind of more the enablers, the kind of picks and shovels, if you will, of health tech. And for me, these are companies that are really focused on building the kind of tools and platforms that will enable the launch of other health tech startups like ourselves, for example. So think of Convnet. I think they've just been acquired, but they really worked on making integration with electronic health records more accessible to all. And I think commoditizing almost their existing API integrations, which is really valuable for us, for example. Another company is called AWell, which does, building basic clinical pathways off the shelf on behalf of health tech companies. So I think really an area to watch, and one that will enable further growth for the whole sector and better care for patients in the NHS ultimately. So that's kind of how I see the space.